the animal now. If he is alive, he will not fail to find us out. Move on, lads, move on." The weather was very hot. Ever since daybreak heavy clouds had been gathering upon the horizon, and it seemed hardly likely that the day would pass without a storm. Fortunately the woods were sufficiently light to ensure a certain amount of freshness to the surface of the soil. Here and there were large patches of tall rank grass, enclosed by clumps of forest trees. In some places fossilized trunks, lying on the ground, betokened the existence of one of the cold districts that are common upon the continent of Africa. Along the glades the carpet of verdure was relieved by crimson stems and a variety of flowers, ginger blossoms, blue and yellow, pale lobelias, and red orchids fertilized by the numerous insects that incessantly hovered about them. The trees did not grow in impenetrable masses of one species, but exhibited themselves in infinite variety. There was also a species of palm producing an oil locally much valued. There were cotton plants growing in bushes 8 or 10 feet high, the cotton attached in long shreds to the ligneous stalks, and there were copals from which, pierced by the proboscis of certain insects, exudes an odorous resin that flows on to the ground and is collected by the natives. Then there were citrons and wild pomegranates, and a score of other arborescent plants, all testifying to the fertility of this plateau of Central Africa. In many places, too, the air was fragrant with the odour of vanilla, though it was not possible to discover the shrub from which the perfume emanated. In spite of it being the dry season, so that the soil had only been moistened by occasional storms, all trees and plants were flourishing in great luxuriance. It was the time of year for fever, but, according to Dr. Livingstone's observation, the disorder may generally be cured by quitting the locality where it has been contracted. Dick expressed his hope that, in little Jack's case, the words of the great traveller would be verified, and in encouragement of this sanguine view, pointed out to Mrs. Weldon that although it was past the time for the periodical return of the fever, the child was still slumbering quietly in Hercules' arms. The march was continued with as much rapidity as was consistent with caution. Occasionally, where the bushes and brushwood had been broken down by the recent passage of men or beasts, progress was comparatively easy, but much more frequently, greatly to Dick's annoyance, obstacles of various sorts impeded their advance. Climbing plants grew in such inextricable confusion that they could only be compared to a ship's rigging involved in hopeless entanglement. There were creepers resembling curved scimitars, thickly covered with sharp thorns. There were likewise strange growths, like vegetable serpents 50 or 60 feet long, which seemed to have a cruel faculty for torturing every passenger with their prickly spines. Axe in hand, the negroes had repeatedly to cut their road through these bewildering obstructions that clothed the trees from their summit to their base. Animal life was no less remarkable in its way than the vegetation. Birds in great variety flitted about in the ample foliage, secure from any stray shot from the little band, whose chief object it was to preserve its incognito. Guinea fowls were seen in considerable numbers, francolins in several varieties, and a few specimens of the bird to which the Americans, in imitation of their note, have given the name of whippoorwill. If Dick had not had too much evidence in other ways to the contrary, he might almost have imagined himself in a province of the New World. Hitherto they had been unmolested by any dangerous wild beasts. During the present stage of their march, a herd of giraffes, startled by their unexpected approach, rushed fleetly past, this time, however, without being represented as ostriches. Occasionally a dense cloud of dust on the edge of the prairie, accompanied by a sound like the roll of heavily laden chariots, betokened the flight of a herd of buffaloes; but with these exceptions no animal of any magnitude appeared in view. For about 2 miles Dick followed the course of the rivulet, in the hope that it would emerge into a more important stream, which would convey them without much difficulty or danger direct to the sea. Towards noon about 3 miles had been accomplished, and a halt was made for rest. Neither Negoro nor Harris had been seen, nor had Dingo reappeared. The encampment for the midday refreshment was made under the shelter of a clump of bamboos, which effectually concealed them all. Few words were spoken during the meal. Mrs. Weldon could eat nothing. She had again taken her little boy into her arms, and seemed wholly absorbed in watching him. Again and again Dick begged her to take some nourishment, urging upon her the necessity of keeping up her strength. "We shall not be long in finding a good current to carry us to the coast," said the lad brightly. Mrs. Weldon raised her eyes to his animated features. With so sanguine and resolute a leader, with such devoted servants as the 5 negroes and attendants, she felt that she ought not utterly to despair. Was she not, after all, on friendly soil? What great harm could Harris perpetrate against her or her belongings? She would hope still, hope the best. Rejoiced as he was to see something of his former brightness return to her countenance, Dick nevertheless had scarcely courage steadily to return her searching gaze. Had she known the truth, he knew that her heart must fail her utterly. End of part the second, chapter 3. Recording by Alex C. Talander. Davis, California. www.alexetolander.com